Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded May 18th, 2022. Good evening, Rod. Good evening, Brody. Good evening, Franklin. Did Franklin show up?
Man,
I'm back.
You almost forgot your name. That's a little sad.
I almost forgot his name, right?
Is that a back scratcher?
Vishal, you don't have a back
yeah,
scratcher?
that's standard fare
Oh,
for
my
the.
goodness.
I can run upstairs and go.
Please
grab
do it
one.
right away. Yeah, we need to get it right away.
Yeah.
I can't. We've
Go
already
get it.
started recording.
Oh, it's fine, man. You think this is a professional, driven, produced show?
Yeah.
Great.
I can cut it out. Don't worry.
We don't publish until next week. So, Frank does all the smooth stuff because this is a hot mess when it's made. And then when he gets it to you, right, it's good.
High production quality. Yeah, and Vishal, if you can hold off with your itchy back for an hour, I mean, that's on you, man. So, but I'll just.
Right there.
I know you can feel it now, can't you? Yeah.
Right there.
All right, nobody can actually see this on the audio podcast.
Oh,
okay.
I'm gonna point that out.
It sounds bad, right? Like, what are they moaning about on the call?
Everybody on audio, you are
Brody,
missing out. Join our live cast
Brody,
to
you
look
should
at all the
actually
fantastic
explain
content.
you should actually explain in detail what you're doing so the entire audience can.
This is
Yes,
a family-friendly show. We're not
For
gonna do that.
accessibility, for everybody who cannot see, I am using a back scratcher acquired in Banff, Alberta, called the Bear Claw,
I have
which
that.
is in the shape of a. You have that one, Vishal?
I have that one. It's sitting next
That
to
is-
my bed upstairs. Got it for Father's
No
Day
way.
years
You have
ago.
the exact same one.
Blue bear claw. I actually got in 3 colors: brown, pink, and blue.
Unreal.
Wow.
Okay, unreal. That just blew my mind. There you go. Anyway, we are scratching our backs.
We just found another guest host because he's part of the back scratcher club.
Yeah.
We got to get him on as a host. Yeah. So, Franklin, I would say what you've been doing, but I know what you've been doing this week. Nothing. Playing
No,
golf
no,
and pool.
Jealous.
Now, today I went to the M365 Security and Compliance user group online. They don't post the videos. This is an awesome user group. They hold their meeting once a month. I guess it's the third Wednesday or whatever it is. So everybody go out to meet up and look up M365 Security and Compliance user group. 2 great talks again today. And so if you're not going and watching their show with their great speakers, you are really missing out. So now I'm just putting more pressure on them always to have great speakers.
Yeah.
But that was it.
We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, put a link in the show notes. I like to reach out. I signed up for the meetup by virtue of the KQL Cafe, but I really haven't joined any others. So I love to do that. But part of my job that is necessary but been bothering me. I've been doing more pricing optimization around Sentinel, and I decided to quit doing it ad hoc. So I'm co-authoring a official doc on guidance on what logs bring in the best value versus the best cost, because I think that a lot of people are gun shy like me. And I think the message is not being transferred or correctly articulated by the front line or the initial salespeople that Sentinel is a product. The flexibility is the ability to change after you deployed it.
Yeah.
It allows you
But
to
I got a question for you. Shouldn't this be the logs are based upon your risk profile?
That's what I'm writing. I need the customer to give me something to tell me what you're trying to achieve, what use cases you have, and then I look at the data sources. Then I ask a series of questions. There's some built-ins in Sentinel. When the last time you run an analytic rule against this, hunting queries? When was the last time that alert or detection was initiated by this particular log? And in Sentinel, you can see that. But prior to that, it was really based on having to go through and comb through alerts. But the art of reduction was never necessarily the forte of SOC operators and SIM implementers before Sentinel came.
Because they didn't see the cost. Yeah.
We talked about that. They didn't see the costs, right?
Yep.
They weren't the ones that bought it. They put a PO in, and next thing you know, boxes are stacked up and they got to deploying.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not with our technical individuals so much as that with the sellers, and the sellers tend to go out with Sentinel's going to save you money over your SIM. You don't know that, right? And a lot of customers, and so that the sales cycle is not so long, it's not a rub. A lot of them are reluctant to have that conversation and rather try to put it off to POC. But you got to get that out of the way. So I think I'm going to stop being gun shy, and I'm going to get this document. I'm working with a guy at Microsoft, JC. What's up, Jeff Chin? Shout out. And we're going to author this, and we're going to get it reviewed. And if everybody thinks this doesn't have any liability, I guess I got to go through whomever. We post it and say, these are the logs you need. Because Gunshot Ed says the minute I tell you not to get that log, something happens, and then you determine if I'd have had that log, I'd have detected this or prevented it. The chances are low, but the chance exists. I don't have,
Yeah.
So I want to get that out. I do not want this to be a headache going into the second half of this year. We got to get something out there. Plus, I'm working with Innocent. We're going to take his blog and how to create a highly available and disaster recoverable solution for the log collector, because there isn't one. So people are sort of doing it by using Azure skill sets and stuff like that. But there's some inherent issues with that if you don't know. But I got it working based on his stuff. I want to work and get it published to like the Microsoft Docs. And I would like for it to be a deployable solution, the way you deploy ASIM, you click on it, it creates it out and does all this stuff to you, right? That's beyond my current ambitions and skill set right now. But I'd like to see that as a deployable solution in Azure and then have it posted in a Git. So I talked to Anderson today. He's done 80% of the work. I'm just going to brainstorm and say, hey, this is how I think we should do this. So that when a customer either goes into the content hub, right? Yeah, content hub. That's where the solutions are, right?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
You click on it and then it'll say deploy log collector.
That's first step.
Yeah. And then what? First step. Well, it should be.
Well, I mean, knowing where it is.
I keep wanting to say solutions.
I know. It is.
Content hub throws
Yeah,
me.
it
I'm
is.
like content, because when I think content, I'm thinking Git, but now Git is repository.
Yeah.
So
It's a little messed up. It's a little messed up. We're
I'm
going to have to
confused
go
just
through another
listening to
rebranding next year or something. I know.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It is what it is. So, Brody, what have you been doing this week?
Well, all of a sudden, this week's theme is access reviews and access packages on Azure AD Identity Governance, which is something that I haven't touched before. And it was all of a sudden like very, very much needed with this current engagement I am on. And so that was a crash course. So I'm getting that going with one of my favorite financial services customers. You know who you are if you're listening.
Didn't they? You got the access reviews going on. Did they get the the people that they bought? Isn't that now available out there? The identity governance, the additional identity governance stuff. That's actually out there in the portals now. Which one was that, Edward?
It's in the portal. I saw it in my portal. It's actually in the unified portal. Oh no, it's in the security and compliance portal. It's at the very bottom. You'll see it. That's not my forte. I stay out of S&C and insider risk and GRC. I'm out of my wheelhouse.
That's the app governance. So basically, that's the rights to the Graph API that you can then see if it's over permissioned or whatever, which is different than the other one that was bought. And I can't remember their name. That was Azure specific roles for seeing if it's over privileged or not.
Risk IQ.
Not Risk IQ. It was another one.
Cloud Knox.
Yeah, Cloud Knox.
That's what I was thinking of. I didn't want to say it. Yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
My team incubated both of those guys after the acquisition. We bring them through us and then they split off. Yeah.
Edward, you're just the big shot on this podcast.
Edward is a big shot.
Well,
Yeah.
I said my team. That doesn't necessarily mean I did any work on it.
There's no
I don't work
IoT.
on this stuff, but we incubate this new stuff and make it go. And basically, Satya owes me dinner. I'm Edward Welton. See you later.
After I went out and bought the company, then they bring them on board, and
Yeah.
I negotiate the acquisition and stuff. I took the easy assignment. When the guys come on, I'm generally a lot of their onboarding buddies into the role.
Actually, that's nice. I'd love to have you as my onboarding
That would
buddy.
be
So
good.
that worked out.
Take them golfing like Frank.
I heard about a new GBB role at Microsoft. Tell me, you guys ever heard of this role?
Let me give you my resume.
I'd never heard of it, and I'm onboarding this person. Somebody reached out and said, "Hey man, I was told you the best guy to come on and straight shooter," so I got him on. And I said, "Tell me something about yourself." And blah blah blah. I said, "So who do you work for?" He said, "I said, I don't know you." And I said, what group? And he told me, I said, you a GBB? And he said, yeah. He's a GBB enhanced.
Ooh.
He is the escalation for the unified support, or what do we call EOD, or whatever that is, whatever
Oh,
that's
yeah.
supported.
Hmm.
That's what they do. Yeah.
You
I
know,
like-
Edward, I've been looking at you and I kind of feel like there's something missing. Is it your Apple Watch?
Ah.
Why you making fun of me destroying that watch? That watch saved my wrist. I was working in the backyard, leaning over, and
Yeah.
my fence door slammed on my wrist.
You should write Cook. I bet he'd give you a free one.
Yeah. But
Out
just
Out of all
ask
the
Satya when you have dinner
out of
with
all
him.
the
He probably knows.
technology that they put into it, you know, Edward's using it as a door stop. That's pretty funny.
When I tell you, I thought that thing would have slammed on my wrist, man, or my fingers, but that watch, it swung me around. I looked at the watch, said, oh my God. So, I don't care what happened. I dropped it. Get out of here.
I need to come on this podcast more often. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of life lessons that I just need to take. You know.
Absolutely.
Have
Vishal.
wear an Apple watch on each wrist, just in case.
Wonder Woman.
I have to wear a watch in general. I got to keep things easy. Like
Yeah.
I was in the Marine Corps. I mean, I haven't met anyone here yet. So hi, thanks for having me.
We do introductions later, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah. All right.
So Rod, I heard you got a new toy that you just enamored with.
Vishal was talking.
Not a $6
No, it's
million
fine.
man doll.
Rod has the floor.
No. I want to turn it over to Vishal. He's more interesting. He's more interesting than I am. Because we have lots of cool things to talk about, especially RSA stuff. The only thing I got to mention this week is Must Learn KQL is now on Amazon, by the way, for those that haven't learned KQL yet. And I have a few conferences coming up, and if I happen to see someone, I'll absolutely sign it. We'll talk KQL stuff. So.
Oh man, I wish I could go to that conference and get my book signed.
I know. But
I'm actually going to get mine signed by Ed. So.
Oh, great. That's wonderful.
just hold it up to the camera right now. I'll do it right there. Hey, if it's on Amazon, you told me that. Maybe I'll go buy 5-10 copies and we'll give it away as swag and contest. Because I got a trivia question today.
The profit goes to St. Jude's like everything. So
yeah. And one of my favorite charity organizations, big shout out to St. Jude. My nonprofit supports them. They're one of the best charity endeavors. If you've never heard of St. Jude and what they do, you need to go check them out. It would tug on your heartstrings.
Hey, before we go to Vishal, by the way, great call out for St. Jude. Before we go to Vishal, I just want to say thank you to everybody who reached out to me after last week's episode about Spanish and Portuguese security sessions. I had people reach out, people listen, go figure. And so if you're listening today and you didn't listen last week, we're looking for more Spanish and Portuguese security professionals who want to speak for Portuguese and Spanish speaking communities within the overall America's time zone security community. So if you know somebody or you are somebody, please let us know. Reach out to me, bcastle@microsoft.com. Thank you. Go ahead.
And if Brody, did the 2 leads I give you respond at all?
Not yet, but I didn't tell them that we were really tight and that you knew Satya. So I'm gonna drop that later, and then hopefully they get back to me.
That's where you're wrong.
the key.
I do not know Satya. Satya knows me. Let's get that right.
Wow.
Pardon me.
You can tell there's a bunch of jokesters right here. So I think we've gone
enhanced.
through everything. Rod doesn't want to talk about his new rig that it comes with a stick on it and says built to run teams. Rather than
I don't want to get the team's product managers yelling at me.
That's what it is. Now you got it. What is it?
It's a 6 gigahertz liquid
I have a
cooled
Dell
128
desktop.
gig RAM.
I have a Dell. No, it's a Dell mini tower, designed to run Microsoft Teams well, so I can actually work while Teams is running. So.
And it calculates pi to.
It required 64 gigs of RAM. So
that's 64 gig of RAM is just a video
Does it
card.
have a GPU?
It does have GPU. Yeah.
Got four in SLI.
Now you can play games with Brody there.
Rod's lying. That computer's so powerful. He mines 6 Bitcoins in a day.
Wow.
He mines 6 Bitcoins in one day.
You're
And
a
then
whole
all the
province of China. Yeah.
And you see in the grid in the United States and the nuclear reactors are straining. Like, what is going on? Oh man. Other than that, man, things good this week. No place, man. I'm on vacation next week, so you guys get to host a couple of shows without me. I'm just gonna be too far in advance in the time zone to make it even possible to join.
Come on. Come on,
Next
you don't
week
want to
we're
log
on-
in from your vacation? Why
Next
you're a
week
team
we're
player?
we're on Reactor next week, right?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
missing
Right.
Reactor.
Well, you got Gene on there.
Well, I know.
He needs all the time.
Okay.
Everything.
All right.
We don't
well,
even need to show up. He could just do it.
probably.
Yes.
That would be pretty funny, wouldn't it? Jing's the only guy that logs in. So,
Yeah,
well, I guess I'm just
okay.
going to present. Yeah.
So hey, I know we got some stuff we want to absolutely make sure we get covered, so Frank doesn't have to struggle on editing to make sure all the good stuff is in there. If he has to struggle
I
with all
struggle.
this useless
Vishal was
banter that
looking
we have.
for his back scratching.
So I'd like to introduce our guest. I've had the privilege of working with him. I remember when I first encountered him, he was lead of the security sellers. I think the old title was ESE, but he's also quite he's quite technical. So he has perspective, and he sees both sides of the argument, as well as good arbitrator in the middle, and he's moved on to bigger and better things. He's the one that at the beginning of the show, Brad. Yeah, I got to talk to Satya last week, and I gave him my opinion on this and that.
Yeah, he took. I think I could have said anything, and he was going to be okay with it, right? He's graceful. Like, he's amazing. Yeah. Now he doesn't know me though. I just know who he is.
Of course. Who doesn't?
I'm not an Edward Walton, apparently.
Hold on.
Is he calling you?
Satya, I'll call you back.
Yeah, is it calling you?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll call you back.
Tell him to submit a ticket.
So, one of the things that I'm bad at is names. I think people humor me when I say their first names wrong. And even a lot of times I don't even call people by their first names. I'm so military, I call people by their last name. So Amin is easy. So Vishal, Amin, introduce yourself, what you do. Okay, what happened? Oh, Brody just gave me the Heisman. He put his hand over our face.
Trying to get the focus to fix. Keep talking, Edward. Keep talking.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Michelle, go ahead and introduce yourself, and the floor is yours, sir.
Oh man, I didn't know I was going to have the whole floor. Well, no, thanks for having me. This is amazing. I've a couple things. Number one, happy or thank you to all the veterans and spouses and military families on the Military Appreciation Month. I know it's also Mental Health Awareness Month, so really two big things for me. Love St. Jude as well, and I do a lot with the nonprofit community, which I think I'd love to kind of bring up here a little later, of some things that we're doing here at Microsoft, the cyber nonprofit. So I head all of our security solutions business now for Microsoft Federal. We've got some other leaders there, so we work directly with our federal customers from our intelligence organizations to our federal civilian organizations, through the White House, all the way over to our defense organizations. So, and then, I have the privilege of working with all of the individuals in the federal business where, if we're talking about sales folks, Edward, talk about parity discussions and having conversations about what's available and what's not in the Fed marketplace. And, we've been trying to drag Rod into a lot of our conversations around Sentinel. He keeps canceling the meetings and pushing them out, but I figured jumping on this podcast, I'd convince him to come on for sure on the next one, So
Ed, what did I tell you this morning? What did I tell you this morning, Ed? Yeah.
Hey, we're all friends here.
We are
now.
But but Rod's a legend. So we, any time to bring him on is awesome. So that's what I have the opportunity to do, is really drive forward innovation and security for US Federal here at Microsoft. And, I've got a background, hopefully, that is non-technical and has nothing to do with cyber, which is great. But thanks for having me. That's a little bit about what I do here.
You have a story background, and that would have to be a separate show, right? I mean,
I give you the 20 seconds. Yeah. I mean,
give me the 20 seconds. Come on.
So I was an enlisted Marine. I enlisted in the 90s. I commissioned a little later, flew F-18s after, and then went back into the special operations community. Due to some of the data and the way we managed it, I ended up on ISIS's top 100 people to be killed list in 2015, where we had terrorists come to our home and try to kill us and our family. Lived under protection for a few years, retired shortly after that. Had no intention of getting into cyber until I realized that what we do and how we scale identity and security operations actually impacts the end user or the warfighter or the person. So I dedicated my life to security after that. Went to a couple of organizations, went to a startup, built on driving cloud security, came here to Microsoft, met Edward Walton, and here I am at Microsoft Federal and driving security for US Fed.
What a story.
Everything in there sounds outstanding except for meeting me. That's the low point of your career.
True.
It's been downhill ever since.
Do you ever make it out to Washington, D.C.?
So I was just there for 3 weeks, actually. We had an amazing event 2 weeks ago, National Security Symposium. Satya came and Jason Zander was there, and Rick was there, our vice president of Microsoft Federal. We had all of our customers there, and it was really great to see everyone in person in a room speaking about how we're aligning security to mission. And one of the key components that we talked about there was how cybersecurity should be an enabler instead of a protective measure, something that enables us to achieve mission, enables us to do more, instead of just focused on protecting the identity or selling another product. One of the key driving factors, we talked about total addressable market and we talked about all those other things, but really cost of ownership is a totally different story in defense as it is in our commercial environment. So a lot of that, but it was amazing. So I go to DC all the time now. It's great. I live in San Diego, as you could tell by the surfboards behind me. I retired out of here. And then, just last week we had some other events, Modern Day Marine last week. And then, before that, we met some of our team for the first time 3 weeks before. So the last 3 weeks have been pretty heavy there, but pretty amazing to start seeing the federal community start coming together in person and start looking at what to do next in terms of security.
So how much is the White House executive order really impacting people? Or is it just every single president that comes in, they have their cybersecurity executive order that doesn't get anything done? I mean, I've seen many of them over the years that hasn't made a difference.
It's an awesome question. It's like one of the first questions we used to get over the last year. So the executive order this year was different. When it came out, it was, around the same time where we had some key executives meet at the White House as well, where, Microsoft as well was invited. And there's an initiatives put in place to empower our federal government to really increase their security baseline. That at the end of the day, you can read the whole EO and it's essentially adopt zero trust and increase your security baseline, right? You'll hear a lot of our security executives at Microsoft and everyone around the community, if you're going to do one thing, enable MFA, right? If I was going to say, you're going to do one thing, yes, enable MFA, but move into the cloud, adopt cloud identity, right? Adopt cloud security solutions that allow you to scale and connect everything. And one of the things that EO empowers our federal government to now do is say, hey, total cost of ownership in the federal government is not about just saving money, right? I think that's a wrong, in my mind, Vishal's take, that's the wrong conversation. When you go to an enterprise organization, total cost of ownership is let's save money, let's consolidate, let's move everything around, let's reduce the amount of people you need for a SOC. When you tell the federal government we need to save money, you're saying, hey, let's take all these people that are well employed, that are doing jobs that you're budgeting for, that you're accounting for the next year, and let's move them over and let's automate all of that. The last thing you want to do is move people away from doing anything. I think one of the conversations you got earlier, Edward, that you guys were talking about was Sentinel, right? And all the log ingest and what happens to the SOC operator. And it's not going to minimize the amount of logs that go in there. It's not going to minimize the ingest. It's not meant to truly automate a SOC. It's meant to prioritize what they're looking at, right? That book that we're talking about, or the paper that we're looking at of what are the number one, ingest feeds that you need into Sentinel, that's key, because what we need is our operators to focus on the most important signals, the high priority signals. That is what it's about. And when we talk about the EO, we're talking about prioritizing what we're looking at, right? Let's re-baseline the federal government to what we need to protect them. And that is MFA. That is having a plan moving forward. And if you look at other things that have come out similar to, special publication 853 around compliance recently, right?
853 is NIST.
NIST special publication 853. You're looking at how do we meet those requirements. And when you look at the EO and you look at some of those things coming out, what we see as an industry is how do we build workbooks in Sentinel and workbooks to automate all of that to make sure that you're meeting those things, right? So to go back to the whole EO question, all of these things have come up because of the EO. And what we've seen in terms of now we're in budget season for federal, for those of you non-Microsoft, non-federal, non-everyone, we're in budget season now, right? And even though October is the go time, see, both of you are drinking because I'm talking about federal budget, and all of a sudden the red cups come up.
No.
So it's not October. What's happening now is we saw the defense budget for cybersecurity move to its own individual request, right? We saw, a total addressable market of over $11 billion of just an increase in like 30% around cyber. And the one thing that I don't think individuals see is that's not cyber product. That's not moving into the cloud, indifferent of AWS and Google and Azure, outside of Okta and Ping or even CrowdStrike and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Our federal government is increasing their cyber budget not to buy more, but half of that is people. They're investing money in people around cyber budget. And when you look at the EO and where they need to get to, they need people to manage and really upskill and bring us to a higher baseline around the federal government. So I'm seeing a lot more investment from the federal government, a lot more action. All the organizations had a year to come on board to develop their plans, right? We're going to see a lot more movement in the next 2 years on how we better defend against nation state attacks. And that's one example.
How is Microsoft assisting servicemen and women that are leaving to transition to the cyber world and into that role? Is Microsoft involved in that area?
I mean, the biggest gap we've had in the last couple of years is our cyber gap in terms of employment. And that's not just around, where people are going as an industry, but it's where the biggest amount of opportunity is. I think Microsoft is doing a lot in terms of filling that gap. We have an MSSA program that we sponsor. And one of the things that I'll share is Microsoft isn't the largest hiring organization around MSSA. We're not. It's actually Amazon, right? But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to enable the warfighter, enable the transitioning veteran to have the skills to go out into the market and start thinking differently. If you look at my background, I'm not a cyber person by trade. But if you are invested in the right way and you can think differently, that's what matters. Ann Johnson once said, when I was speaking to her, she said, we're not going to solve the problems and the issues that we need to overcome by looking at things the same way. We need someone with a different perspective. We need diversity. We need a different opinion. And that's what it's all about. And that's what we're doing at Microsoft, through Microsoft Military Affairs, through MSSA. But outside of that, it's not just MSSA and Microsoft that's doing it. What we're doing is we're partnering with community colleges and skilling, right? Nice. We're partnering with other organizations and creating a network of just individuals and people that can actually train veterans to invest in cyber in different facets. Cyber is not learning about product. It's also operations. It's also program management. It's threat hunting. It's still supporting all the legacy infrastructure for the federal government. We need all that, right?
If I can chime in, Microsoft does have an official vehicle for that, and it's called TEALS.
Yeah, we have TEALS as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what I thought I very saw your first name, because I was trying to volunteer for it, but I didn't have any bases in my region that I could actually, in time zone. But TEALS is a program with Microsoft where they look at transitioning veterans who want to go into the cybersecurity field by mentorship of volunteers who are in the cyber community with Microsoft. So you can go and sign up for TILs in the Microsoft. Well, if you want just research TILs, if you're a Microsoft employee, they'll find you in a rotation. They'll attach you to some individuals. They try to get like-minded service members, like Navy to Navy, Air Force, but sometimes it's mishmatch. You got to get a Marine you got to work extra hard with, but that's okay.
Yeah, we started eating meat. Look at that.
Look at that, man. You got all the crayons. But no, TILs, for those that are interested and you're military and you listen to us, Microsoft has a program, T Tango Echo Alpha Lima Sierra TILs, and you'll be able to go to it.
There's also the Hiring Our Heroes Fellowship that that any service member can apply for through the Skill Bridge. And Microsoft has a list of all of those individuals through Hiring Our Heroes that you can put down cybersecurity as your preference, and they'll try to find a fellowship here at Microsoft for those 3 months that you could come on and actually shadow.
Nice.
An Edward, a Brody, a Rod, in our organization to understand more about our organization, our culture in general.
Cool.
So
Hey,
what
Vishal,
role?
go ahead. Okay,
Brody.
yeah. So I'm from Canada, so I'm outside of U.S. Fed space, but I've heard that through reading and researching over time that private sector has sucked up the best talent, and it's really tough for public sector to retain good talent because of salaries and competitive. Just the competitive landscape has changed from what it used to be decades ago. So the point that you were speaking to earlier about future investments that this administration is making, which I love, by the way, into cyber, something that North America really needs, is part of that rekindling that we have the best people in house in our public sector, and it's not just all being shipped private sector these days. Like where you think back to some of these. Well, I've been reading a book recently about, it's called This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends.
Oh, it's a great book.
What a great book. And Nicole Pearl Roth from the Times or the Post, I forget which one of the two. And it just talks about how it used to be NSA had the best people. We had all the top of the line, and then everybody gets farmed out now to private sector. And it's tough for public sector to retain that talent. So anyway, I'm rambling. What's your take on how public sectors, not only United States public sector, but other governments can help retain top talent and help our countries?
So no one joins. Well, I joined the military as a mistake, actually, just a different story for a different time. And I actually got sucked into 21 years. But everyone else, no one joins for money, right? Usually you join for a sense of service, to be part of something greater, to be part of, the Marine Corps Gun Club, whatever you want to join, you join for those reasons. And usually when they transition out, you've done your time and you're seeing opportunity for personal growth later. That's not going to change in any organization, any industry you go to. People jump from one organization to another. What changes is where they're investing in terms of purpose, right? And meaning and mission. And we're always going to see that skills gap. It's going to go more and more. I mean, as the industry picks up with cyber, people are paying 3-4 times as much for that talent as you would get in industry in the Department of Defense. So the way we have to look at this is not how do we retain these individuals, right? It's how do we train them early? How do we empower them early so that when they're in the defense sector, they're utilizing the same tool sets, the same skills, the train methodologies. Do they all have Learn KQL? Do they all have the book? Is it standard when they join, right? Are they learning the languages, the processes when they're in, so that they're influencing the way the government is upstepping their game? And that's where our sales teams, our business teams, our engineering teams need to start investing in deeper, right? We need to start empowering them earlier instead of selling to them. And that way we're encouraging those individuals who are protecting mission, who are protecting warfighters, to come back into industry and teach us what's important by utilizing the same TTPs or tactics, techniques, and procedures that we're adopting. Instead of us telling them, this is how you should hunt, this is how you should prioritize alerts, this is how you should, manage across cloud, multi-cloud, on-premises environment, they should be sharing us how they're doing it, right? Utilizing those TTPs. So I would say we're still going to have that gap, but the only way we're going to bridge that cyber gap is to invest in education, in the training commands early on, and things of that nature. There's a lot of other stuff that I think is involved in that type of initiative, but I'll pause there. Edward, I think you had your hand up.
Thanks, Vishal. Appreciate it.
I have a comment on this. When I used to cover federal for Microsoft and everything else, everything you said is absolutely true. But here's the problem. I got up and I forgot what I was speaking in an event, and they said, what is the main issue of being able to get talent into this field inside agency, right? You can choose DOD, DOE, whatever, the Department of Defense. And they asked me my opinion. I said, well, my opinion is, and this riffled some people at the very beginning, you need to change the leadership mindset. And if the leadership mindset doesn't change the leadership. Okay. Because they're still looking at this as a liability against their budget rather than enhancement of their budget. And I forget who said it.
We're talking about DOD leadership, you're saying.
Yeah. If the leaders do not understand this and bump for this to say, hey, not only do we have to budget for the technology, you have to budget for the salaries. While they may not be able to keep up with commercial and corporate, you got to make it compelling. The old adage of coming on to an agency or division or government or federal that you get a pension, no longer. That is not a boon anymore. And a lot of individuals voiced their opinions and said, hey, the Air Force has some really good cyber folks, really good cyber people.
They're doing an amazing job, right? And slowly they're innovating.
Yeah. And what is happening?
Well, I would say it's fast. They're not slow anymore. We're seeing a lot of growth in the defense sector, but I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
But what they're doing is they are testing the market. The whole adage of your retirement can take into account your time and rate and time and service, who cares? If a corporate entity is going to pay me $150,000 more than you, and I know my skills won't get antiquated because they're going to be leading edge, they're going to be bleeding edge, you got to fix that. And then they said, okay, that is a long-term fix. We can't solve that here. What is your second one? I said, pay them. I said as part of the first, make it so that it's compelling regardless. You got to give them a period of time that they are compensated in a manner that they're not embarrassed against their peers. Because I think a part of it is psychologically that, all this war fighters and everything, we still have a sense of service and patriotism. But when you got to bounce that against livelihood and family, because not everybody gets out on retirement.
Most people don't, right?
And that's it. That's the two I gave. And everybody, I think, saw me on stage as too big brain at the time. You thought I had said something.
I think you're absolutely right. But let me add another factor in there. And let's tie it back to what we're doing at Microsoft. It's not just operationalizing security from a human perspective in the defense organizations, right? And losing that talent pool of threat hunters and some of, let's say, the cyber defenders or the cyber warriors. But now, because what's our latest number at Microsoft? It's 24 trillion signals a day, right?
34.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
37, actually. 37 trillion a day.
Is it 37 a day? I can't believe I'm.
Let me look at the counter. No.
Yeah.
That's 24.
10
Powered by
trillion.
his desktop. Yeah.
No, I don't know. Last I heard it was 24 trillion signals a day.
Yeah.
Right. And you have all of that coming in, and you don't know where to prioritize. So most of your cyber hunters are task saturated. So even if you were to modernize in the defense organization, it's going to take a while. The budgets and the way things move, it takes a while. So what we're seeing now is something that's populating more on the enterprise, on the commercial market, which is a managed XDR, right? MSSPs, right? Coming in here and actually taking hold of the market and saying, let us manage this for you at scale with the same people over time. And when you look at who's doing business with the federal government, when you look at these large integrators like the SAICs of the world, the Northrop Grumman's of the world, the Viasats even of the world that are doing like all the satellite and ground stuff with us, from small to big, these are organizations that are now starting to see that gap and see how we can't fix that leadership problem. And it's not even a problem, it's that dilemma we have with federal procurement, budget cycles, and initiatives, I would say. and take that, and they're saying, let us pick the ball up and let us run with it. And that's another factor you're going to put in here is now you're going to see the Northrop Grummons and the SAICs and all of those actually take hold of, hey, we're industry, we're cyber industry now. We're going to run the security operations centers. And if you really think about it, that's no different than what our enterprise organizations are doing with MDR practices, MSSP practices. So our responsibility at Microsoft now is how do we build a platform that encompasses all the telemetry, that prioritizes the logs, that everything works together where we're minimizing the footprint to allow these MSSPs to actually roll this stuff out and do this for the federal government at scale. And that's where I'm seeing a lot of these hunters going, right? Is taking that resident knowledge and then going to these MSSPs within the primes and building out large programs. So I think, Brody, to your question, it's more than just where are we innovating. I think we're going to start seeing that shift to see where we can broaden out those programs of influence, like in that sector. And to add on to that, we're not just seeing it in defense. I would do a lot with 501c3s. You say St. Jude's, Edward. I do a lot with Travis Manin Foundation, and another foundation I can't name yet until June 6th, and I don't know when we're airing this, so I won't say it. But one of the things we're looking to do is how do you take all of that telemetry and empower organizations like St. Jude, right? Who have a cyber, their SOC is made up of one IT person and one admin. It's probably more than that at St. Jude's, right? But I'm actually positive it is more than that at St. Jude's. But they don't have a cyber operations center, right? So how do you take all that telemetry and empower them? And that's something that if you talk to Microsoft Philanthropies, I work a lot with Priyo over there and Justin Spalog over at Microsoft Tech for Social Impact, Microsoft Philanthropies. That's a big initiative that they're working on, and it's no different. How do you take industry and plug it in to a sector and sustain that moving forward and empower people? Right.
I agree with you. I wasn't shaking my head to disagree with you about that one person. I was shaking my head like that's a shame because it's true, right?
Yeah.
And plus, they're in Memphis. It's not a talent pool.
They get extorted, right? Last year, look at the number 2 Microsoft Digital Defense Report this last year. What's the number 2 and number 3 most targeted demographic from nation state actors, from Nobelium all the way on, right? It's NGOs, it's nonprofits.
Man.
Right? Can you imagine
scumbags.
You're out there serving a mission, right? Like, let's say the Travis Manin Foundation, serving a mission to empower families of the fallen, to empower students and kids to live their lives with character, right? You have one IT person on staff and you have a nation state actor come in, lock down your infrastructure, and your business is, I don't know that I'm just throwing numbers out there. Your business is a $5 million to $10 million business. And you say, it's small for a 50 person organization, and you lock it down and you say, you pay me $50,000 right now, otherwise you're not going to be able to pay your employees, and it's a week before Christmas. And I saw that last year and the year before. Can you imagine? Right? And that's the reality of today's world.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get all passionate about it.
No, that's an extremely good point, right? Like we got to, we all have a common adversary in cyber, right? Regardless of what organization you're a part of, and some organizations don't have the resources to deal with nation state backed threats with seemingly endless buckets of money to push for these extortion events, right? And yeah, it's sad.
Defender for Endpoint, Intune, Azure Active Directory alone aren't going to stop them, right? And that's why I love this conversation and this group specifically, right? We're not focused on SIM and SOAR. We're focused on how people automate, operationalize, and prioritize the signals that come from that. That's what's going to stop them, right? It's connecting that data with people. That's what our technologies do.
Yeah. I'm still seeing in smaller organizations them thinking that, hey, I have antivirus and a firewall, I'll be fine mindset, which is annoying. Let me ask you, in the federal space, what is your involvement with like CMMC and dealing with vendors, or you don't deal with that at all? Or has there been a positive impact from that, or what's the deal?
CMMC this last year was almost this taboo subject, right, around the defense industrial base organizations. When you look at the primes, all the policies around CMMCs and Rev 2.0 there's a lot of confusion in terms of how we enforce that. We're very involved in it with most of our large organizations that partner with the US government, are all compliant. They all do what they need to do to make that happen. It's really the conversation around in my mind, the US manufacturing organizations. Edward, I think you've been involved with US manufacturing over the years. So, he could probably speak to this as well. I think we worked on one of them together last year. And it's the thousands of defense industrial base organizations that need to find a way to be compliant and to meet those CMMC regulations, whatever tier it is. So that we do have some deep involvement there. One of the, and just to share, and nothing under NDA. So this isn't under NDA. This is public. We've actually done things like write custom workbooks in Sentinel for organizations to utilize to see if they're compliant.
They shout out to TJ and Lily. Be on the show in June.
TJ, are they coming on?
On June 1st.
Oh man, I want to be invited to that one. I want to be invited.
Anytime, Vishal. Anytime.
You're invited. So yeah, come on.
They just updated the 853, by the way.
Yeah, I posted that on LinkedIn as well, and the TJ put it in there. And there's about 8 different workbooks that they've worked on this year, right? And CMMC is one of them. And the reason I pivot to TJ and Lily CMMC workbook, which was one of the earlier on ones, is they noticed that, Frank, is we've got thousands of divs. How do we help them? The difference here, though, is, right, we're not a government organization. We're a private sector organization that builds with our technology, right? So what TJ and Lily really tried to do was build a workbook that you can deploy in Sentinel, right? But really plug in what you actually have. And that's the difference. That's where we're going as Microsoft. When you look at CMMC, when you look at the EO, when you look at these other things, we don't want to be a Microsoft only organization. We understand every organization has different facets, different endpoints, different clouds, right? And when it comes to CMMC, when it comes to compliance, there's different things that come in that we don't see. And that's where I think it all comes together for us is things like workbooks and Sentinel, where you can actually hold yourself accountable, especially for the self-reporting pieces and being able to self-generate an audit report for the auditor when they come. I think those are key.
Yeah, I want to make sure. I want to make sure though that it's not just the workbook. So these are actual solutions. It's the workbook. It's the analytics rules. It's the hunting queries. Everything comes with these things. So
yeah, you're right. These are solutions. It's exactly what Edward was talking about earlier. Is building that solution out, and that's what these are. These aren't just running the workbook. These are actual solutions. They're a full package that comes with it, and we're making them available, Frank, to our customers to utilize. Right? There's no handcuffs there where they reach out to their Microsoft teams, and we're going in there with our global black belts, with our technical specialists, and showing them this is how you do it. And it's not just giving it to them, but it's really training the trainer, teaching the individuals.
And are we giving them the GBB enhanced though? That's the question.
GBB enhanced. That was a real role. This is GBB. The big thing about that is that the value of that, because I've seen private sector people that serve public sector companies, partners, try to reverse engineer that and make their own solution.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, that looks familiar to some I've seen somewhere else. They're stripping it down. They're trying to figure out how to do it outside of Sentinel.
But good on them, for just breaking it apart, and trying to figure out what matters for them. I mean, we have to think different,
Yep.
I've got two compliance questions for you. First one is dealing with Defender for Cloud apps. Not Defender for Cloud, it's just Defender for Cloud. We don't talk about Defender for Cloud apps on the show. I'm just kidding. It's Edward's favorite. That's why I have to say that. So we've talked a lot about Sentinel or whatever. So what is your take or when you talk to people about Defender for Cloud and compliance and Azure policy, what do you tell them about that?
I very simply, I feel no matter how much we talk about Sentinel and MDE being these big motions here at Microsoft Defender for Cloud is the soul and the core of how we reach the rest of the infrastructure. Let me use one example, especially around policy and Azure policy and how you architect that. there's a simple example here is to be able to really look at your security posture and where you sit and be able to go cross cloud and hybrid, right? That's where that comes in. I think that was the cornerstone product set or Azure service that allowed us to say, hey, we're not just protecting Microsoft, every server, every VM, right? Everything that we're doing, like let's start with Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And I could say that when it comes to the federal government, one of the things that we have multiple conversations on is what we used to call, and I think we still called it, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint for Server, MD for Server, right? It was the most confusing thing for our federal customers. And then we said, well, why don't you utilize at the time legacy Azure Defender or now Microsoft Defender for Cloud? And they said, well, it's the price point, right? So we took that feedback, we went back and we looked at things like Qualys that aren't available, right, in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. We looked at our hybrid, our cross-cloud capabilities and things of that nature. And those are the types of things we're working on. So what I'll answer to you, Frank, is it's the core of what our security story lays on, in my opinion. It's where majority of the impact we can make, the visibility we can make is. So when I look at other organizations, what they're doing on premises, what they're doing in terms of threat hunting, and I look at the Vector AIs of the world, I look at the Tenables of the world, I look at some of those other organizations. It's the story that Microsoft Defender for Cloud is going to tell us. How do we connect those to that for US federal in the next year or two? That's the engineering effort that needs to happen. That's what we are working together on, and it's happening, right? I know Jason Zander and that team are doing so much to empower our federal government, but that is literally at the core of our security story.
So let's talk about compliance from the data standpoint. That's available on the cloud side, DLP, sensitivity labels, all that other fun stuff. That's available on the Gov Cloud.
Right. So
and go ahead. And do you have specific, I guess it's called initiatives or whatever because I know that out of the box, it only comes with 2 on the commercial side. If they get the Gov version of the compliance side, is there specific initiatives or I forget what they're called now for getting a score on their compliance score comparison?
So the short answer is yes. We do have specific initiatives for US federal. Okay. Many of those are, under NDA, and we'll share them specifically with our US federal governments of what we can enable for them in terms of their compliance standards and how they deploy, what they own really. So what we're focusing on right now is not, buy more compliance solutions from Microsoft and invest in Microsoft in terms of purview and where we're going. But we're saying, well, what do we enable now? What do we focus on, right? DLP, what do we need to do in place, in your organization, whether it's auto labeling, whether it's, the classification, what's important to you. And then what we're doing is we're taking those individual initiatives around compliance and we're sending them to we have a government solutions program or a government community. I forgot what it's called. It's one of our communities at Microsoft where we only allow government customers in. And what they do is
it's a public sector tech community. We had one of their peers last week.
Yeah, it's like a VIP community where we only let our .gov customers in there. And what they give us is, under NDA and with those decision makers there, they give us their hardest problems and we go to engineering, we build with them. And that's one thing that we are peeled back, from my GBB community, and some of those Matt Littleton of the world, right? He's amazing. He's leading the effort to really regenerate how the U.S. government utilizes compliance and moves that forward. Because no longer now are we looking at compliance as just a sole, DLP or modern work solution. Right now it's extending out into Azure, and that's where the whole purview conversation comes in. That's how we look at the policy now on Azure. That's how we look at holding all of our infrastructure accountable for all of the standardization and the special instructions that are coming out. So without going into any more depth there, we do have a program in place, and it's available for any U.S. government customer that's listening today. And all you have to do is reach out, and we onboard you onto that to get your feedback to build there.
Just shout out to Matthew Littleton.
Big shout out to Littleton.
I onboarded with him, and he's funny. Plus, he's a shipmate. He's retired captain.
He is. Yeah.
Retired captain. Cool.
If not, we just gave him a promotion. So
he let me know he's a captain.
Hey, Vishal, have our government customers put my mind at ease, please. We've had the Oldsmar water treatment facility incident. We are learning, unfortunately, from everything going on in Ukraine right now in terms of critical infrastructure being attacked. Is the U.S. government making significant strides to help improve critical infrastructure protections in the United States as part of these learnings that have unfortunately occurred?
Unequivocally, yes.
Great. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that. Okay.
Without a doubt, I mean, there's no pause in my mind of and what comes back to me is when you look at the EO that Frank messaged earlier and asked me about, one of the call outs in the EO, Frank, was public-private sector partnership, right? And I've never seen so many public sector, private sector collaborative meetings or workflows than I have in the last 6 months. And every single one of those goes back to those two things, critical infrastructure. And I said those two things, critical infrastructure, and the other thing is supply chain, right? So those things are coming up in every single one of those conversations. I mean, we just released another announcement on supply chain and solving to secure the supply chain, so that something that we can populate here as well in the chat window or something. I don't know how you guys do it just yet, or just look at the LinkedIn's and they're there. But critical infrastructure and supply chain are top of mind of all of our U.S. government organizations. You look at organizations like Department of Energy and even the edge cases in the defense side of the house. It's something that comes up every time.
So let me be a cynic. Let me be a skeptic.
Yeah,
on two fronts here. I agree with you on one part, I disagree with another.
Sure.
When it comes to entities that, and for lack of whoever's in charge, let's just say the entities that the federal government can enforce because they ultimately control your budget of some sort or can affect it, then it is easier to make them comply. Private sector people still think this is a suggestion, but the first time something happens, they look for the FBI, NSA, and all this other stuff, and they start screaming, "Oh, you need to come help us because we're critical infrastructure." One thing I've learned about private sector, they don't respond to that. They only respond to pain. And so if they have the semblance that something is, they don't have to pay for it in advance, and will ask for help rather than be proactive. Colonial Pipeline, prime example, right? You want to quickly label yourself critical infrastructure, but when they went back and do the review afterward, ransomware someone is bad. You don't do that, right? Especially if you affected someone's ability to operate their nation state, their nation. But when they get down into the dirt, everybody just sees that they didn't pay. How many deficiencies that they had, and a lot of it because of hiring, and they did not want to put money in. And so these private entities that want to partner up with the public entities, I'm still skeptical, because I know that one side of it, you have teeth.
And one of the things, we have to be very responsible as a private sector entity when we partner. One of the outcomes that I've seen that our leadership has had at Microsoft with our government officials is we don't want to offer the government the moon, right? If you give them everything, how are they going to manage it? How are they going to implement it? When I was put on the ISIS kill list in 2015, the organization I was part of, they owned the solution to solve for that and protect my data. It just wasn't implemented, right? It wasn't adopted. And when I look at public-private sector partnership, there's a sense of responsibility there. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing responsibility and accountability held hand in hand, right? We want to work with them to provide them what they can actually consume, rather than provide them everything that they need. And then also hear what they need. There's another piece, right? When we combine critical infrastructure to mission, right? The one thing and when I talk mission, we're talking operational mission or mission objectives in the Department of Defense, for example, or the federal entity. There is a clearly defined way that they categorize critical infrastructure for U.S. federal government and any federal government. For example, when you look at our worldwide, customers or organizations, right? It's a lot easier in your case, Edward, when we have private sector organizations to maybe classify yourself one versus the other, depending on where they sit, right? But in the U.S. federal government, you're right. We can hold them accountable for what we classify as mission critical or critical infrastructure. So what I'm seeing is when I look at private-public sector partnership, the big organizations, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Oracles, the Googles, right? We have to come to the table and be receptive to what they're saying, but we also have to offer our insight and we have to offer suggestive measures. And one of those things could be our ability to procure in a faster basis, and not just procure the technologies and the people, but to deploy it and to adopt it, right? And that's always been a gap for us in federal. That goes back to people, that goes back to processes, that goes back to technology. And we're trying to close that gap by doing what we have to do as a private sector organization. But our expectation also is to ask the federal government, hey, why don't you come our way as well? And they're doing that, right? They're putting the right people in front of us and partnering with us to have those conversations. And indifferent of where we've come and all of the opinions there, we've come 180 degrees in the last year or two, right? And I've never seen us come this far ever. The new battleground is cyber, right? And it's exactly. and I would say it's not new. You're reading that, you're reading an amazing book, and you can even read Brad Smith's book, right?
Right. Great book. Yes. It's been happening for a while. It's just becoming more and more known. And obviously with Ukraine, the hybrid war situation there, it's just being amplified to the public today.
A big piece of it where you have actual critical infrastructure affecting people, and the community has to come together. So the partnership is happening. It's happening at, an escalated at a 10x pace. It's just, in my mind, it's our ability to consume it from a federal perspective rather than provide it. We can provide all the tools and necessary means to defend it against nation state actors, but does the federal government have the people, the processes? And
one thing that you're blending, you're jumping from federal, then you're talking to private. So I commend you and admire you on fighting this hard fight, right? Because I've seen tremendous strides in federal, right? I see what's going on over there. But I'm gonna be a cynic again about government involving with private sector. You can't promise them the world, but when you want to enforce stuff, these private entities push back and they start talking about, well, you're going to kill my business, right? Because they still see cybersecurity and investment as a liability. And what do? They're both passively resistive and actively where they go get lobbyists to make sure legislation that will put greater onus and accountability on them don't pass. I think people forget how many bills have died because lobbyists have said, you can't do this. You can't tell us how to operate our business.
Right? And I think I empathize with you there. And I agree with you, right? I mean, I think there's a responsibility as a sovereign organization within whatever country we are in, that sovereign footprint for us to essentially empower the individuals, the schools, the teachers, the students, the constituents within it to do what they need to do, to profit the way they need to profit, to operate the way they need to operate. And there's a gray area of how do we hold them accountable, right? And yet protect them at the same time. What are the best practices we utilize? So there is a lot of recommendations. There is a lot of best practices, and where we start seeing those policies blend the line and not and all the bills get rejected is where do we actually hold them? How do we hold organizations accountable for managing data, right? Like that GDPR is a primary example.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
So I have a lot of opinions here, and not all of them are positive. Okay. I really like CMMC because it's a maturity model.
Right.
I think the things in the past where the bar was set so high that organizations just gave up on dealing with it because they knew that if an attacker got in, they failed, they would get nailed anyways. So it was not, and then they were just increasing cost. So where CMMC and GDPR was more realistic about going through. I've seen too many situations where organizations have been used to establish case law, and they don't really care about the situation. So, I think there's a two-way street here that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, the next question is this, you might not know, is where are we with state and local government versus federal?
Good question.
I'm going to send that one over to Edward. No, I'm just
state and local government is struggling, right? I have a peer that works and she covers that. And I'll give you this. This seems counterintuitive. But state and local government seem to be more receptive of, we know we need this, because it doesn't seem big government like federal. This is where I work. This is the SSN. I mean, this is my local government is the handling taxes and stuff. That had to happen in Baltimore, that put them down. They couldn't even process deeds, close houses. I think we just see the ransomware piece, but we don't look at the business disruption because we don't consider SLG traditional business. But they will listen. It comes to budget, and they don't have it because they're struggling to keep the skilled individuals, because private sector, once again, undermining, is stealing those individuals from public service.
I'll remind everyone of 2 years ago with state and local government, where, when we were moving into the cloud, and what I mean by that is really moving into Office 365, moving into Azure, moving into AWS to optimize costs for state and local government, right? Not adopting modern security best practices, literally in this case, enabling MFA for a majority of state and local government. We saw a rash in security incidents across cities, counties, states, all over the US. And the one thing that, Frank, I'll share there is the one big piece was enablement, was education, was understanding, training, right? That's the one thing that, I saw it tail back to, is just the understanding of where we've come as a security community and where it needed to be understood. There wasn't a place for it to be championed, right? At the county CIO's office at the time, maybe, or at the state level. There wasn't budget allocated to that because it's part of one entity, maybe in the federal government. So state and local government also has come a long way, but I've seen more organizations move to the cloud because of the security incidents that happened, because they were forced to do it. Right now, over the course of the last year, we've seen a lot of modernization in state and local government. I think Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, from the Microsoft side, we've seen a lot of uptake in that. And that's partly because they want all the visibility and all the data and all the telemetry that they could see through that, with a smaller footprint in the state and local government size, right? And feeding that into, that joint security operations model that they have has been valuable. And so they're modernizing. We see state and local government investing more and more in security operations, specifically around MDR services, moving into that MSSP model eventually. But right, that endpoint story for state and local government was the MFA story 2 years ago now. And that's kind of where we see it. There's also initiatives in place that we are working on specifically with the state and local government that trickle down from even the federal business, that empower the state and local government to innovate as well. The one thing that I love Rod's opinion on, actually, Rod shook his head. Maybe Rod will agree with me, is one of the big initiatives I see around state and local government is the same thing I see in federal, is modern log management, right? How they're going to attack that, because that is going to drive their costs and their budget out the roof. And that's going to stop and frankly halt their ability to really protect those organizations to the scale that the enterprise organizations can. Rod, what do you think?
So I would absolutely agree with you. So the biggest, and it's not just a federal or state local government, it's literally most of our customers that have had experience with similar tools that Microsoft provides as part of their platform these days. We've not always been part of this security stack in the security industry. Customers have used other tools, and the unfortunate thing, it's just it reminds me like of Internet Explorer, some of our earlier browsers, how bloated they got because you could add everything. But those same security tools got so bloated, and they created some really, really, really bad habits for our customers. Right. So they wanted to collect everything, every little log file. And it's overwhelming. And in doing so, a lot of our customers stopped doing some of the most critical pieces of security. They stopped being vigilant. They stopped monitoring. They stopped looking at the things that were necessary because it was just, they were flooded with content. They couldn't even keep up. So this reapproach of trying to figure out how to integrate more security. I think a lot of cases, state and local government, particularly because, they're overwhelmed and understaffed. They're looking at it as one of these kind of painful moments where, we have to start doing this again. But I think
keep this much hot storage, right? We got to get them for 12 months. I mean, that's where compliance, Frank, starts interjecting with the ability to budget and scale with security. Is you're at a state government. Imagine if you're at a state government with high turnover, right? And you come in and you say, what do I do with all of this? I can't get rid of it.
Yeah, I got to retain it. Yeah.
What am I going to do? And now all your budget is being eaten up day by day because you've got 12 months of just stuff sitting there. So that's modern log management for me is not just an issue, but it starts with, when it comes to federal and SLG, it bleeds into compliance. It bleeds into our ability to actually do and optimize security operations.
Yep.
So
we're running up against. Go ahead.
I wanted to make sure at least though, because Vishal, you're great. You're awesome as always. Love you, buddy. You do have something coming up here shortly where people could actually potentially listen to you and talk to you in person, right? You got something come up in a couple of weeks?
I can do that in person. Those things exist. Weird.
So I'm so excited. I'm so excited that Microsoft will be at RSA this year.
Oh, in a big way. Yes.
And not just in any way. We are, I think we pretty much took two apartments in San Francisco, which probably are $13,000 a month, I'm sure. Yeah. And we put them together and we put them right in the middle of RSA this year. Yep. And the intent there is to bring everyone back together and have one-on-one conversations. So what I'm looking forward to at RSA this year is I will be there for the entirety of RSA this year, meeting all of our government leaders and our customers and even our internal teams and really collaborating with each other, but also be speaking at RSA and we'll be at the Microsoft pre-day on a government panel. And that's inclusive of SLG and federal. So we'll be speaking on issues and going a little deeper than we did today, but really answering the questions of the audience on how we can better work with our federal government customers, how we can secure, empower, and build with our federal and SLG customers. And I'll be there all week, and I'd love to meet anyone and everyone that attends. So come find me either at the Microsoft booth. I'll have some individuals over there to help me line up some meetings as well. And then I'll also be at the Microsoft pre-day all day the day before. So please come find us there. I believe that we may have a few other folks on this podcast and people that are coming up in the podcast there as well, including Rod. Hopefully, I'll be there hanging out with Rod. So you'll see me with the $6 million man there.
I'll be hiding from you.
But come say hi. And the whole part of RSA this year for us is let's build together and let's do it to not just secure the organizations, but help you. One of my business individuals and on one of my teams said something amazing. And he's actually an old SLG guy, Dennis Guzzi. And Dennis said, defender by default. And I'll do that by, hey, security by default, right? Whenever you're modernizing, whenever you're moving into the cloud, whenever you're looking at something, it should be enabled by default. And that's my goal, is let's build so that security is enabled by default so we can actually start doing the cool stuff and start doing the missions. And that's kind of one of those topics that we'll be going through here at RSA this year.
super
Did
cool.
you have anything else you wanted to talk to us about? I know, before we went live, you mentioned something, or was it RSA?
Yeah, it was RSA. Yep, absolutely.
RSA?
I have 5
non-conference.
words I can leave everyone by, and I told you I do a lot of work with the Travis Manion Foundation.
Oh,
And
great.
the foundation does a lot with former presidents and all the families of the fallen. But Travis said 5 words before he left on his second deployment to Iraq, where he gave his life, and his brother-in-law said, hey, if I push you down this, he was at an Eagles game. If I push you down these stairs, someone, you'll break your legs and you don't have to go. And Travis looked at him with a serious face and he said, if I don't go, someone less willing, less able, will have to. And the words he left his brother-in-law before the last deployment was, if not me, then who? So, if you're listening to this, and I translate that to what we do in the security world, what we do in life, if you don't take action, if you don't take initiative, if you don't push against the norm, right, who else is going to do it? So, be that person, right? If not me, then who? And that extends especially out to what we do here around cybersecurity and enablement and digital transformation and all those buzzwords. But at the end of the day, it's you taking physical action, go learn KQL, go learn how to hunt, go learn what's wrong with how we're doing it or how you're doing it. If you don't do it, someone less willing, someone less able will have to. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank
All
you.
right, Edward, take us out.
So everyone, thanks so much. I'm sorry I had to go off video for a little while. I had an issue at my front door, but we're good. Vishal, even beyond the knowledge you've shared, your passion, you still serve. It's built into you. And I can appreciate that, right? I admire you. I don't think your mission statement is easy, but if it was easy, why would you do it? I don't think you look for easy, right? You're always welcome to come back on this show. I'm not as ingrained anymore with your side of the house. That is Jeff Schlugenberger, perhaps.
Yeah, we sent him over last year.
You're solid. You're solid, man. You sent him over for him to come back, in a sense, right? So he's covering that.
You can have Jeff. You can have him.
Man.
Big shout out to Jeff. He's amazing.
Big shout out to Jeff. Jeff has grown up. Unless you have any final comments, I'd like to conclude the show and thank you once again for coming on. Make sure you come back June 1st when TJ and Lily will be here.
Yeah, send it to me. I just want to be a fly on the wall with my back scratcher on June 1st.
I want you to heckle them. That's what you do, right? So with that, we'd like to close out the show. Thanks everybody for listening to the podcast. We look for you next week. Stay safe, stay secure.
Oh, by the way, Frank, we need to get like an ending audio thing for our podcast.